So let's welcome our next speaker, James Melton. He's, the last speaker talked about people who are inspired by experiences in life. James Melton began his teaching career in the cockpit of an airplane. He flew before he could drive. And when he was 15, his father drove him to an airport in Milwaukee for his first flying lesson, and he received his pilot's license when he was 16. His mother, with confidence, was his first passenger, and a brave woman. From that point on, he went to multi-engine fixed-wing planes, helicopter pilot, flight instructor, and airline pilot. He has been a professional speaker, an author, he was a former journalist, college instructor, and he lectures worldwide on leadership issues and holds a PhD in management. Public television produced an 8-part series on his work entitled Reaching New Heights of Excellence. Most recently, the National Space Society's Ad Astra magazine has agreed to publish his personal interview with Dr. Zubrin, which will be released in the fall. It'll be called Who Will Go to Mars? And that is the topic of his talk today. So let us welcome the author of Red Planet Leadership and the leader of the Mars Society chapter in the California High Desert. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
And let's give another round of applause to Erwin for sticking through it all day long and for doing these introductions. Welcome. I'm glad to be here. I've been thinking about going to Mars, or maybe on Mars. And if you can smile when things go wrong and say it doesn't matter, if you can laugh off cares and woes and troubles make you fatter, if you can keep a cheerful heart when all around are blue, then have your head examined, Steph. There's something wrong with you. Eventually, things are going to go south. Now, we like to think maybe we've got it all put together. Hannah, you gave a wonderful presentation to set me up, and Raven did a great job as well. And I'm going to be talking about the human element. As a matter of fact, in my book, Red Planet Leadership, I lay out on page 49 and 50, I won't be reading them, but I lay out what I call the stellar dozen. And these are quick fixes to incidents that will come up for sure on the way to Mars. Now, the point of it is, how do we get it fixed? What do we do? I mean, we're talking about the human element. I hear about robots, I hear about panspermia, I hear about all kinds of things, and yet, where will this fix come from? I think that what we actually need here is some way to take technology. I don't think we've got to put to bed totally, but we've got a pretty good handle on it. It's the human element we have a problem, and we put men and machinery on the moon nearby planets. We've got submarines that'll dive into the ocean floors. Our nuclear physicists and biologists are probing the innermost particles of matter. Our computers can solve some of the most complex problems in life in literally seconds, but we're still faced with a dilemma. And if not handled, it will face us on into the future of our children, the future of our grandchildren, and it will trail us on to Mars. And the dilemma is how to keep people paced with technology to enhance the human experience. Now, I think we need some kind of a shift, and I call it a Zubrianic shift. Now, if you haven't heard of the Zubrianic shift, has anyone read this book on Isaac Asimov? It is called The Chronology of Science and Discovery. And it's how science shaped the world and how the world has affected science from 4 million BC to the present moment. Now, this book is so insightful. It talks to the present moment, and it even goes up to 2018. An example. He talks about the Zubrianic shift in here. The Zubrianic shift is a term that was first introduced by James Melton on August 23, 2018, at the 21st International Mars Society Convention in honor of Dr. Robert Zubrin, the president and founder of the Mars Society. The Zubrianic shift represents the continuing evolvement of balancing technology and culture and exemplifies the Occam's razor principle. Occam's razor principle, as you may know, is of multiple solutions, the simplest is probably the best. So, how do we build these traits, these elements within individuals as we are growing, moving, forming a culture on Mars? What do we do? Well, we all know that, and you've mentioned this, Hannah, we all know that a solid society is built on respect, ethics, and trust. So, when do these things occur in a person? You ask any psychologist or psychiatrist, and they will tell you that a child will begin to form these from birth by example of their parents, but by the age of 6 to 8 years, they will be instilled. Now, my friend Ron, he's a consummate teacher. He lives in Prescott, Arizona. And he was going to the bank one day, and his son Jason wanted to go with him. So he said, okay, get in the car. So they got in the car, they drove to the bank, and Ron got out of the car and said, Jason, wait a minute, I'll be right back. So Jason watched his son walk through the watch his dad walk through the glass doors of the bank, walk up to the teller, greet the teller with a smile on his face, hand the teller the check, and got the money, he counted it, turned around and walked back outside of the bank. And he stopped, and Ron pulled the money out of his pocket again and recounted it, and had a perplexed look on his face. Put the money back in his pocket, walked back into the bank, into the car, and Jason looked up at him and said, Dad, what's wrong? He said, son, we have a problem. The teller has given me $100 more than she should have. We have an ethical dilemma, and I need your help. Should we or should we not tell your mother? All right, so think about it this way. Who here in this room, who here in this conference room, who here in Pasadena is functioning on ideas that we formed as a child? I'd like you to set your beliefs on the side for just a moment, and let's talk about going to Mars and how we're going to do that. Because very pointedly, we can live our dreams, we can live our desires. I was giving a lecture at the Cherry Creek School System in Denver, Colorado. There were superintendents, principals, and teachers in the room. And I was talking about goal achievement. I like to give programs on goal achievement. Some people do goal setting, but I like to achieve. So I was talking about an hour, and the talk was over, and the guy came up to me. I could tell he was angry. And he said, you've been standing up here for an hour talking about pie in the sky, and I can have what I want, I can do whatever I want, and I can live my dream. He said, one thing I can tell you for sure is I can't have what I want. I said, well, you got me really curious. What do you want? He said, I want to be an astronaut. And he started walking away. And I said, wait a minute, can I ask you a couple of questions? And he said, you just insulted me. No, I want to go sit down. He said, let me ask you a couple of questions. So reluctantly he came back, and I said to him, have you ever taken any classes on aircraft oxygen and pressure systems? He said, no. I said, have you ever studied anything about physiological functions in zero gravity? He said, no. I said, have you ever taken any flying lessons? He said, no. I said, have you ever been to the Houston Space Center? He said, no. I said, have you ever applied for a position as an astronaut? He said, no. He said, I see what you mean. And I said, what do you do? And what do you love? He said, I love to see a child grab a hold of a new idea and use it. And I said, what do you do? He said, I'm a teacher. And he said, isn't it great we can all do what we want to do? What are we saying to ourselves? What are we doing to ourselves? How are we communicating? So there are 5 elements that we need to hold on to when we go to Mars and we start communicating with our team members. A friend of mine, Phil Hawes, maybe you know Phil Hawes. He was the master architect of the Biosphere 2. And one of the major breakdowns was not in technology. What was it, Steph?
The crew split in half.
Exactly. The crew split in half. So what we're talking about here is be able to communicate clearly. Now, my friend George Shapiro was a professor at the University of Minnesota in St. Paul, Minnesota. He was a professor of communication, and he did a study. And he found out that only 7% of what is said is heard through words. If you mathematicians, if 7% is said through words and heard through words, what is not being heard? What percentage? 93% is not being heard through words. 38% is heard through the feeling, the intonation, the enthusiasm behind the words, and 55% of what we convey is heard through body signals. Lee Iacocca, former chairman of Chrysler Corporation. He's not speaking very much anymore, but his words still ring true. He said that one thing I hate to see on an individual's evaluation, no matter how talented the guy is, that's the line, he has trouble getting along with people. He said, to me, that's the kiss of death. You've just destroyed the guy, because that's all we got around here. No dogs, no apes, just people. And if you can't get along with his peers, what good is he to the company? And I thought to myself, yes, the art of getting along with people is a challenge to many of us. I mean, sometimes we just don't know how to communicate. And attitude plays a key role in life. Attitude. I mean, sometimes we get up in the morning with the glass half full, like it was last night, or maybe the glass half empty, however it might be. Some people get up in the morning and they say, good morning, God. Others get up and say, good God, it's morning. I mean, how did you get up this morning? Test me on this. Don't take it for truth that I'm saying that you are or aren't a person with a good attitude. But how many are flying back home? Okay, when you get on the flight deck and you walk by the flight crew, say to the pilot, hi guys, how are you doing? How would you feel if they said, geez, are we tired? I mean, you want to get out of there. You want to fly with enthusiastic people. You want to fly with a positive attitude. So what are we saying? What are we doing to communicate to other people on how we feel? And Walt Disney is a perfect example. I spoke with the Disney Corporation. Actually, it was a year ago in August in Glendale. They felt that the topic was so important, they live streamed it to Atlanta, to Seattle, to Orlando, and to Paris, France. You know what the title was? Enhanced Team Communication. Can you imagine Disney, an organization that is so successful, wanting to encourage their people to communicate more clearly? All right, next point, listening. And this is one of the big keys in Biosphere 2. People just don't listen behind what they hear the other person feeling. So we've been born with 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we get that confused every once in a while. I'm not sure exactly how that happens, but we need to listen with 100% attention. If someone asks you about your children, what are they waiting for you to ask them? This is called audience response. About their children. When someone asks you what you do for a living, what are they waiting to share with you? What they did. What they do for a living. When someone asks you where you went on your vacation, what do they feel inside they want to share with you?
They want to go with you.
They want to go with you. Okay? People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Listening is so critical. Observing also is key. I believe, first of all, that we listen with our minds, we only hear with our ears. And if that's true, I believe we only see with our eyes, but we observe with our senses. So what are we observing? You have senses. I mean, we do things on feeling. We breathe when we feel like breathing. We sleep when we're tired. We feel tired. We scratch when we itch. We eat when we're hungry. I mean, even our excretory functions operate on feeling. We hire and fire on feelings. We fall in love on feelings. So why don't we pay attention to our feelings? Sometimes you're walking down the street and you see someone and just instantly you know that you hate them. You know, or that you love them. If you pay attention to your feelings, you can tune into that, and it's important to do. How do you get to know what kind of a person you are, and how do you get to know what kind of a person someone else is? Let's take an example. You're at a funeral. Not a very pleasant experience, but there's a guy lying there in the casket, and he's dead. And you've never met the guy before. And you have no idea who he is. How do you get to know what kind of a person he was? Get to know his friends. But by the way, the number of people who come to the funeral will largely be determined by the weather. So you want to schedule that date very carefully. You see, corporate executives don't hang out with bums. Students on the honor roll don't hang out with coffee clutchers. Top producers don't hang out with ne'er-do-wells. We tend to draw into our circle of friends those people who think like we do. I'm pleased as all get out when I draw into my circle of friends those people who think, because most people don't. Ken McFarland, the great American educator, said, if most people said what they were thinking, they would be speechless. He said 2% of the people think, 3% of the people think they think, and 95% of the people would rather die than think. Most people want someone else to do the thinking for them. Maxwell Maltz wrote the book Psycho-Cybernetics years ago. Have you heard of that book? They still give college programs on psycho-cybernetics. And he said that experimental and clinical psychologists have proven beyond the shadow of a doubt that your mind cannot tell the difference between something seen visually and physically and something imagined vividly and in detail. Can't tell the difference. That says to me we can start playing some games with our minds. We can start impressing what we want to express, and we can start thinking about what we want to come about. Now, I want you to join me in a little experiment, please. Take your thumb and index finger and make a circle out of it. Now put it up to your eye and look around. You've been wanting to anyway. Okay, now put it over your head like this. Now start shaking it. Looks a little stupid, I know, but just bear with me. Can you see me okay? Can you see me? Bring it straight on down, right on down your chin. That's it, on your chin. This is your chin. I didn't say I wasn't dumb. I never promised you a classy lecture. I didn't say I was going to give one classy lecture. I never signed a contract for that. But it does drive home a point. We do tend to respond to what we see. I want to ask you the most powerful question you've ever been asked in your lives. How do you see yourself in your mind? Because I can guarantee you this, the way you see yourself is the way you greet the world, and that is exactly the way the world greets you back. And you know what? At the risk of being redundant, there's not that much allowance for ignorance. We've got to know what we have inside, and we've got to know how to get it out. All right. Close to the end point. Speak confidently. Say what you want, not what you don't want. speak of the solution, not of the problem. If you are a leader and you are entering into a conversation in a group and the conversation is spiraling down, either lift it or leave it. I'm talking about word magic. Word magic will form the fabric of your future. Ladies and gentlemen, the way we say things in a tuna can, as Robert Zubrin talks about it on the way to Mars, or in an arena, the way we say things does make a difference. If you want to convey something, you have some information, and you want to say, oh, come over here so we can talk turkey. That's kind of telling you really want them to come over there. Or, come on over here so we can talk turkey. How do we approach things? I've got a friend back in Milwaukee, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing on the telephone. He was talking to a gal who rejected him to go out. And here's the way he sounded. He said, well, why don't you want to go out with me? I mean, probably for that attitude alone. I was going to Best Buy one day. And, I mean, what people say is amazing. And I was looking for one of these remote speakers that I plugged into the computer. And I asked the guy, what's the difference between a Samsung and the, which one was it? The JBL. And he said, $100. Well, I was looking for a price comparison, all right, but I was also looking for a value comparison, something upon which I could make a value judgment on which unit I wanted to purchase. As a result, I left and I purchased neither. Someone once said, what you don't know can't hurt you. And I want to take issue with that. I think what you don't know can cost you dearly. It can cost you your financial fortune. It can cost your relationship, and it can cost you your life, especially if you're going to Mars. Say what you want, not what you don't want. When you change the things you say, you will change your experience. When you change the things you say about your relationships, you will literally change your relationships about whom you're dealing with. Last point has to do with accept people for who they are. Robert Frost put it so beautifully. He said, we love the ones we love for who they are. Not for what we want them to be, not for what we know they could be, not for what we think they should be, but for who they are. And the bottom line, which is underlying some way, very often is, they say, if only you were more like me, then I'd love you so much more. What a boring world it would be if we were all the same. Praise diversity. Listen, communicate, speak confidently, observe clearly, and accept people. I think it's so important because there are only three kinds of people in the world. Those who make things happen, those who watch things happen, and there will always be those people who wonder, what happened? They have no idea what's going on. Questions? Thank you for your attention. Questions? There's time for a few questions. Anybody? Yes?
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
Here's what first of all, it was just a great presentation. Thank you so much. What I wanted to say is when you talked about what we think, I'm kind of thinking that is also around the whole thing about perception. What we perceive about ourselves is based on what we have seen and experienced, and then it keeps changing. A lot of times it's our own perception about ourselves that builds over time, and we think that's the way the world is towards us.
And your question?
So my question is that similar to something, the same thing you were talking about when you said...
Sure. What we think about, the mind works in interesting ways. First of all, everything in the physical world has its origin in the non-physical. From the chair you're sitting in, the clothes you're wearing, the ceiling, the floor, the lights, the walls, as Zubrin did it this morning right here, it has its creation in the mind, in the thought. It was first an idea. Then you have that idea, and the more you think about it, you create an image with it. You create an image, and the more image you have, the greater image, the more real you make, you develop a feeling. And then we act on our feelings often, and the results in our lives are directly related to the thoughts we choose to think. So are you thinking positive about yourself? The way you see yourself is the way you're going to greet the world. Quick question.
Yes. How can you, in preparing people to go into space, they're going to need some kind of training, interpersonal dynamics and whatever. A lot of people have never had that. You have to have crew coordination. How would you go about preparing people for adding this element to their training?
Probably like any corporation would to bring employees on board. They have ongoing training. First of all, a program or a convention, as well as this program is done, it's short term. What we need to do is a long-term program, like you were talking about, the religious aspect. Something we do on a regular basis will tend to be embodied more strongly than something that's just on a short-term basis.
This would help with team building.
It would definitely help with team building. It would help with the crew commanders, getting people to work together effectively. Of course it would, yes. One quick question there.
The psychology graduate, and it's sort of interesting how people screw up because they tend to do the same mistakes time after time. In an airline pilot, it's called in resource management, teaching people to communicate better, to avoid human factor errors. My human factor error was trying to teach doctors about human factor errors in their psychology, thinking that if they still haven't made mistakes, they'll stop doing it.
Yeah.
It doesn't do it. You have to train them what to do, not train them to understand what they're doing. How does that relate to what you're saying about developing people who aren't going to get into conflict on one service mission? Can you teach them what has gone wrong so that they avoid it, or do you have to fundamentally change that?
Well, experience isn't a bad teacher. They say experience is the best teacher, but if we only relied on experience, that would be kind of tough. We need to learn vicariously. We need to learn from other people. And if we could listen behind what we hear the other person feeling, we might have a better opportunity. I believe that clear communication comes out of several things. The way things are said, the intonation, the feeling behind it. And if we are attuned to wanting to do something, we'll find a way. But you could go on and on ad infinitum about what makes good communication and what doesn't.
Well, you know, I mean, none of this is new stuff. The military, mission-critical systems, the body of knowledge goes back pre-World War II.
It does.
And they're really the experts in the field because they've learned through experience and to redo the concepts they had to hone them to work best. The airline pilots, for instance, people aboard ship, where these things can be life-threatening.
Definitely, yes. Time-wise, we have no more time for questions, but thank you again for your attention. I appreciate it.